Happy Boxing Day. It is Thursday, December 26th, 2024. Last one on the face of the planet. This show is The Hard Count. If you were with us yesterday, we had a show on Christmas Day. We got a show the day after Christmas Day as well. A lot to get into today, all right? Just because we got the holiday season does not mean college football is slowing down at all. We got SEC Mike, the man, the myth, the legend, in the digital media space joining us to talk a little about his Vols, talk about whether he would take the SEC or the field in the college football playoff. His name is SEC Mike, so a little bit of a spoiler there for where he might lean. Then also talk a little bit about Florida and where things stand right now in Gainesville with DJ Lagway and the Billy Napier era. Also going to talk about Ohio State and the potential of them. And if they beat Oregon, y'all, we'll just say this, it's game on. It's game on. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But I want to start here. The seeding for the college football playoff is just absolute nonsense. The numbers next to the names make absolutely zero sense. So I thought it might be appropriate for us to get together right now and do a power ranking of sorts for these teams that are left in the college football playoff 1 through 8. Make sure you're subscribed. College football, nothing but college football. It's an absolute privilege and an honor to do this with y'all on a daily basis. Again, if you haven't locked in with us yet, man, we have a good time on this show, have a good time on this platform, the On3 YouTube channel. Would love to have y'all dialed in. So let's start here. The team that I'll power rank number 8, as it stands right now, is the Boise State Broncos. Now, that sounds like a cop-out. It sounds like, JD, you're just taking the G5 team and putting them at number 8. Well, yeah, I am, because I do think that the G5 roster, in comparison to the rest of this field, probably should matter a little bit. You're saying, JD, they played Oregon to a 3-point game. They absolutely did. I don't think that Oregon team they saw in Eugene necessarily stayed the team they saw in Eugene. Boise State's going to be a tough out with Ashton Jeanty running the football and what they're built to do up front. Now, to me, I'm a little bit more in need to see it to believe it as of late because, again, I think the Oregon game was impressive, but I want to see them do it in more than just a one-game sample size because they also played some lesser competition that is not Oregon in a much closer fashion. So respect Boise State. They deserve to be in. I've said it many times. I think the seeding for the college football playoff is nonsense. I think auto bids are nonsense. If you took away auto bids, Boise State, guess what? They're still in the college football playoff. I'm here for it. Right now, I'll put Boise State at number 8. At number 7, I got Arizona State. Now, I love Cam Skadaboo. I love Sam Leavitt. I think this team has a tremendous what-if factor to them because at the end of the day, you still got to see Cam Skadaboo in the box. You still got to tackle the gallon jug player of the year for us here on this show, The Hard Count. If you know, you know. If Sam Leavitt gets rolling and they can challenge downfield a little bit to guys like Xavier Guillory, then maybe the box gets lightened up, Cam Skadaboo gets rolling. We're looking up at the end of the day saying, all right, Arizona State, they got to win in the college football playoff, and they're going to be a tough out for whoever they draw in that next round. However, I think the heavy bar is something we talk a lot about on this show, and if you don't know what that means, essentially we're just saying who you play leading into certain games matters. I don't think Arizona State has played any team the caliber of which they will have to see the rest of the way in this college football playoff, starting with Texas. Not to say Arizona State can't go out and beat Texas, but I do think that that will be the greatest test they've seen at this point in the season, and I think that will be a bit of a shock to the folks out there in Tempe, would be my estimation. Not saying that can't happen. The what-if factor is great, but for us, Arizona State, the way they're built, who they've played, we'll put them at 7 as of right now. Now, 6 through 1, it gets a little bit interesting. I think honestly, 6 through 3, I could probably argue with you. We'd have a good back and forth, have a good discussion that would have a lot of legitimacy for any team within the 6 through 3 rankings, depending on how you were to divvy it up. I'll put Penn State at 6. And the reason why I have Penn State at 6 is primarily geared toward their offense. Put a pin in that right now. The defense and what they are up front, if it was just about the defensive line, Penn State's playing for a national title. Like Abdul Carter is that good. Denai Dennis Sutton is that good. My question is the offense good enough to be able to propel you to a win if your defensive line isn't having the best day at the office? Like the Oregon game's a great example. The offense is scoring 37 points against Oregon. And we're like, hey, if you told me on Friday that Drew Aller is going to propel this offense with Tyler Warren to 37 points, I'm like, okay, awesome. They probably beat Oregon. They probably won the Big Ten. The defense, though, allowed over 40 points. Now, Oregon's a different beast a little bit here. You're talking about teams you have to defend. I worry a little bit about what we're going to see from that Penn State output if they have to get into another game like the Oregon game where they got to score 40 to win. So for me, I'll put Oregon at 6. I'll put Notre Dame at 5. Now, if you have Penn State ahead of Notre Dame in your own personal power ranking, more power to you. I just trust the formula a little bit more as to who Notre Dame is. I think they do a great job forcing teams to play their style of football. And I think that if you were to compare the weapons for Notre Dame and Penn State, Tyler Warren's probably the number one weapon. But with Jeremiah Love, with Jordan Faison, with Jaden Greathouse, with Bo Collins, with Mitchell Evans, there's so many guys for Notre Dame to distribute the football to where if they run the Mike Denbrock offense to the way you're supposed to run it, if they play within the confines of that system, they're going to be in good shape and they're going to score points. I think it's also noteworthy how solid they are up front and how solid they're able to play up front because of what they do on the back end. Like Xavier Watts is an absolute dude at safety. I think you could say he's the best safety not named Caleb Downs in the country. They trust them on the back end a lot, and to this point in the year, they've done a phenomenal job winning their matchups on the back end and allowing those dudes up front to go eat. Now, is Riley Leonard everything that you want in a quarterback? Is he throwing for 300 yards a game? No. I think he's a lot of what you need, though. I think he's a lot of game manager in the best way, brings something extra with his legs, has, for the most part, done a good job taking care of the football recently. That's good enough for Notre Dame. I think the identity of Notre Dame is a little bit more sure of itself than the teams behind them on this list. So I'll have Notre Dame. I'll put Notre Dame, rather, at 5 in these rankings. Now, at 4, I got Texas. And Texas, I think, may have the most untapped potential in this entire field because right now you got a quarterback in Quinn Ewers who, before the year started, was projected to be a first-round pick. As of late, he has been very game manager-ish. Outside of the Georgia game, he's pretty much good for a little over 200 yards a game, maybe a pick here, 1 touchdown, maybe 2, like pretty pedestrian in a lot of ways. And so if you told me before the year that these were going to be his numbers, I'd say, okay, well, Texas probably has 3 losses in the regular season, maybe. But Texas, to their credit, has been gritty, physical, tough. I said it in a different video. I think they're a lot more of a Hummer / like Toyota RAV4 operation than they are Ferrari. We thought they'd be Ferrari, throw the ball around the yard. They're flashy. They got this quarterback who's going to be, a postseason dude with a ton of accolades before the year starts and all these things. But they haven't been that, and they still finished second in the SEC. They still beat an ACC champion Clemson, and they still, even with injuries at the running back position and the offensive line, ran for darn near 300 yards. So the potential of what they could be if Quinn Ewers put it all together with those weapons they have, from a Gunnar Helm to a Matthew Golden, I like what Texas can be a lot. Now, are they going to evolve into that in the winning time of the college football playoff? We'll see, but I'll put Texas at 4. Now, the reason why I don't have Texas higher, and you could make an argument for them to be higher, is I think they're blocked, for my money at least, by Georgia at 3. Now, Georgia's at 3 for me because of the fact that it's still a roster that is chock full of 5 stars with a head coach that has a national championship, that has 2 national championships, I should say, to his name. You say, well, JD, yeah, that was Georgia, but Gunnar Stockton playing quarterback right now should change the complexion of how we view them a little bit, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that Georgia will look different with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. I would remind you, though, that Georgia didn't just hold the lead against Texas. They weren't up in that game when Gunnar Stockton came in. They were behind, subbed in their backup quarterback. Gunnar Stockton led that team to a victory in overtime in Atlanta over Texas. So, are they going to be a team that's throwing it all over the yard? Probably not. I think similar to what we said about Notre Dame, it's more need versus want right now. I think it is more need to run the football, need to be able to stay on schedule, need to have an extra answer in the run game, need to play good defense. Would you like to have this awesome vertical passing attack from Gunnar Stockton? Sure, it'd be great. But I think what you need is physical, smash mouth, Kirby smart defensive football. It's still Georgia off 24 days of rest. I still think that has to matter. So for me, I have them at number 3 in our power rankings with these teams left in the college football playoff. Now, there's only 2 teams left here, and the team at number 1 beat the team at number 2, so we'll talk about them in a second. But the team at number 2 is Ohio State. And I think a lot of us, when the Michigan loss happened, were a little bit discombobulated because Michigan's not like a national title contender this year. Michigan played in the ReliaQuest Bowl. All right, it's not an outfit that's as shiny as it was a year ago when they won the national championship. They're in a down year. So for them to beat Ohio State with the most talented roster in college football in Columbus currently threw us for a loop. Who is Ohio State? Are they good enough to go win the national championship? Are they actually who we thought they were going into the end of the season? My answer is yes, they are. They're still the most talented team in the country. I think when they're on, they're a monster. Was talking with Caden Smith as I do for every single show we do here on this platform before we got rolling here, and he made a great point. Like, if we were to just guarantee that every single one of these teams the rest of the way were to play at maximum output, Ohio State's winning the national championship. And that's not to say anything of Oregon or to say anything of a Texas or a Georgia, but like with that roster, with Will Howard throwing the football downfield at that level, with Chip Kelly being aggressive, with the defense in the back end playing lockdown to their NFL caliber of dudes they have back, like that would be a problem. And again, I think that would translate to Ohio State winning the whole thing. So Ohio State, I can't put them ahead of Oregon right now because they lost to Oregon, and because of the Michigan game, honestly, that probably has to matter a little bit for us when it comes to power rankings. Again, not resumes, not college football playoff rankings for us right now. I'll have Ohio State at 2 as it stands for us here moving forward. Now, the team they're going to play here in the Rose Bowl, who we have at number 1, the Oregon Ducks. Like, it's just very difficult, I think, from a watching them play football perspective or from a logical perspective to put Oregon anywhere besides number 1. They haven't lost a game. They don't really have a glaring weakness. They're extremely well-rounded. They're top 10 in terms of points per game scored and points per game allowed. They have a tremendous competitive approach from what we can gather with how Dan Lanning has that thing dialed in. Like the moment hasn't gotten too big for them. We don't see this massive letdown after Ohio State when they go play on a short week at Purdue. Purdue's Purdue, but Oregon was still the wagon we thought they were in that spot as well. That should tell us a lot. I cannot wait to see what they look like here as they move into playoff mode. If they don't have that letdown or that, I guess the best way to say it is if they're not carrying the weight of perfection on their shoulders and they're truly living in the world of this is a 4-quarter season, Oregon is going to be that team that's hoisting the national championship trophy on the podium in Atlanta. Now, again, the Ohio State-Oregon game, I think, is going to tell us a lot about the national title's destiny. Just full transparency, we feel very strongly about both those teams. Picked Oregon before this tournament started for them to be the national champs, so we're not backing off that right now. But for me, Oregon is still the best team in America. Whether you want to trust the college football playoffs rankings, you want to trust the seedings. For us, on the hard count power rankings, Oregon is number 1 as we sit here going into this field of 8. So to recap it for you, Boise State, I got them at 8. I want to see more. I'm encouraged by the Oregon game. If they snap, they snap, and we'll have a talk about that if they beat Penn State. But for me right now, Boise State at 8. Arizona State at 7. Tremendous what-if factor with them, but still have them at 7. I'm very curious to see if they can step under that heavy bar in a game against Texas and meet the requirements. Penn State at 6. That D-line is ridiculous. Is Drew Aller able to just will that passing game into something with Tyler Warren? We'll see. Notre Dame at 5. Love the formula. Love their identity. Texas at 4. I mean, they have the most untapped potential of this entire thing. Georgia at 3. Still Georgia. 24 days off rest with Kirby Smart. Ohio State, the most talented roster in this whole deal, and Oregon, number 1, we just talked about. So those are our power rankings as it stands right now. Very excited to see how this translates here and how right we are on these power rankings as this whole thing progresses. So we're going to be joined by that man, SEC Mike, here in just a second to talk about Florida, talk about Tennessee, talk about the playoff and the SEC as a whole. Before we get to that, though, want to let y'all know the Hard Count brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Okay, code HARDCOUNT. When you just play a $5 lineup, $50 in promo funds. All right, so we're going to swing big here in the playoff season. Going to have a conversation about a playoff square that we like a lot here a little bit later in the show. But use that code. It just lets people at Prize Picks know that you're dialed in. They see that. Helps us. It helps them. Helps all of us if we're swinging a hot bat when it comes to Prize Picks. So appreciate y'all using that code and appreciate y'all being subscribed. Now, let's have a conversation with that man, SEC Mike. Welcome in now, a friend of the program. That is the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Bratton, but you probably know him as SEC Mike from that SEC podcast. Mike, I'm fired up to have you back on the show. We had you on in the summer. The people went nuts, and when the people want more SEC Mike, you give him more SEC Mike, man. So how are we living this morning?
Hey, doing great, and Merry Christmas, even though it's a little belated Merry Christmas to all your audience, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's funny because I said this morning, like, we're recording this at 4:30 Central Time on the Sunday after the college football playoffs. So we're a little bit of time travel here, making sure we get the people what they want for Christmas. But let's start here, man, because we're less than 24 hours removed from this. There's obviously a very strong Tennessee Volunteer affiliation with your platform. Just give me the good, the bad, the ugly, the cold hard truth as to where things stand right now in Knoxville after what happened in Columbus. We're recording this now 24 hours ago, when you're watching this right around a week ago.
Oh yeah, I can sum it up pretty easily. Fire everybody. I mean, that was the immediate response. Tim Banks can't coach a defense, and I'm sitting here arguing the guy's a finalist for the Broyles Award. I don't think firing him is going to do much good unless we can get Nick Saban or Kirby Smart to come down here to Knoxville and not be head coach, but be defensive coordinator. So it's hot right now. And now the rumors, as have been everywhere, but now that Tennessee's season is officially over, the rumor mill's going wild about who will or will not enter the portal, who should. I mean, some of the players, they want to enter the portal after that performance they did. They showcased on Saturday night. I mean, it's hard to even think about it, but once again, I'm a Tennessee grad, so I know all about it. I feel like the Tennessee fans did their part, and the team just kind of fell flat on its face, which is, that's what I'm used to the last 2 decades or so.
To be fair to you and the rest of the Tennessee fan base, like, it was a tough draw. Like, you talk about 8 seeds, like Ohio State being the most talented roster in the country, $20 million allegedly putting that thing together, and Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs and Will Howard playing good football. Like, it wasn't necessarily the most fair of 8 seeds to draw. It was kind of the worst draw I think you'd have in the first round. Is there any understanding, which is a funny word to use? Is there any, like, using the proper filters to assess what that loss was, or it's just like, hey, man, the score is the score. We can't show up like that against a team like that, especially in the first ever college football playoff appearance for Tennessee?
Yeah, well, first of all, what you said about the seeding is nonsensical. Why Boise gets a bye, why Arizona State gets a bye, I'll never know why they agreed to that. Tennessee should have been playing at home, but coulda, shoulda, woulda. They got smoked on the road, and I know we are less than 24 hours from that whipping that Tennessee got, but, man, I'll be honest with you, the fans are not happy, and this is a common theme. Josh Heupel can't win on the road, seemingly, and now he's got a couple in his back pocket, but beating Oklahoma, now that we know what they turned out to be, of course, Alabama couldn't do it, but beating Oklahoma is not really a marquee win when you're losing at Arkansas, getting smoked by Georgia, and now the most embarrassing was on a national televised scene when you had all these fans show up and thought you had a fighting shot. Now, I'll be honest with you, I never thought Tennessee was going to win this game because for everything you just said. I mean, I think people got it in them just because Ohio State got beat at home and looked disgraceful against Michigan, that this was a beatable team. But, this is a top 2 roster, I think, in all of maybe the best roster in college football. So going to their place Saturday night, that seemed like an unwinnable game, but that's no excuse for just getting smoked 21-0 right out the gate. I mean, it looked like a Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving or something like that. You know what I mean? Heads got to roll after something like that. And I'm not saying they should fire everybody, but this is 2 years in a row now where Josh Heupel's offense, it seems to be stuck in the mud. Particularly in these marquee games. No one cares what you do against Kent State, and no offense to Vanderbilt, what you do against those. They want to see you score some points against some of the tougher teams you got to face, and they got a defense now and they got a running game, but it seems like it's the offense that's holding them back. And I feel like Josh Heupel needs to go outside his coaching tree and quit promoting from within and get him some offensive-minded assistants that are going to bring in something that's not currently there with the coaching staff.
The point about Ohio State is interesting because I almost like that matchup for Tennessee better if Ohio State had beaten Michigan. Because once they lost to Michigan, it was like there were 2 opportunities, or 2 paths, I suppose, for Ohio State in that game. It was they let the Michigan game happen a second time and they fold and the vibes are bad and they just pack it in, which kind of felt unlikely, honestly, the entire time. That we were saying on this show, Ohio State is so desperate to where if they did lose that game to Tennessee at home after the Michigan loss, like the Columbus may have ceased to exist on a map. Like it would have been DEFCON, whatever number you want to put to. It would have been very, very bad. And so I think like the perfect storm of things against Tennessee happened in that playoff game in terms of leading into it. So I don't really know what to make of Tennessee, honestly, Mike, coming out of that thing. Because the defense was so elite this year, top 5 in America in every single category, to where it's like, that's awesome. Can we bank on having that in the future here? And Nico Iamaleava, I think, will be better, but like after what we saw this year and after the underwhelmingness, I suppose, of the playoff game from him downfield and really this entire year downfield against quality opponents, how much better do you think he gets from year 1 to year 2?
Well, I think he could take a massive jump because, again, I know I just mocked Vanderbilt, but, that was the final regular season game. That was the best game I thought he played. And not that he played really particularly well against Ohio State, but he was probably their best player. And that's really saying something considering how bad Tennessee was. You know what I mean? But the guy didn't quit. A lot of guys, I think, in that situation would have quit. He was getting, my goodness, what was it? The first possession, they cracked open his helmet. They were after him all night long, and he never quit. He showed a lot of heart. But, again, it goes back to the scheme. I really do think. The first couple of years, Heupel was just scheming these guys completely wide open. And I think the SEC, I think college football has caught up to it to an extent. Or, maybe it's just the elite teams. But again, you're losing to Arkansas. That was inexcusable. I think they've got to find new ways to scheme up something. And they don't use motion at all. He's got to adapt his offense somewhat. And I don't put it on Nico to answer your question long-winded. I think Nico could be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC next year, but he's going to need a heck of a lot of help because the offensive line is not going to be the same. Dylan Sampson is going to be off to the NFL. And this receiving core, at least based on last night and a lot of the season, doesn't really have any big-time playmakers. So it's almost like they got to rework the entire offense. But thankfully, they do have Nico if he stays, assuming he doesn't jump in the portal like some fans are calling for him to do. But I think he's your only shot at having a halfway decent offense next year.
I'm glad you said that because as much as I kind of led into that question saying, hey, there were some underwhelming parts of this year with the downfield passing game, I don't know if that's all on Nico. In fact, I would say, like, if you talk to other, football people around the college football space, it's like, hey, man, there's nobody that is worried about any wide receiver from Tennessee striking fear into what they do defensively. Like, we saw last night, Ohio State was content to just play right up in their grill and say, if you want to catch the football, awesome, we're going to be right here waiting for you. And so if you're Nico, it's like you have that going against you. Also, you don't have Dylan Sampson in the football game. Also, you're playing from behind, so you kind of already have to adapt your game plan in that sense. Like, I was really impressed by the edge we saw from him in the Vanderbilt game. Like, from an emotional perspective, the edge we saw from him against Ohio State, where he does, like, the LeBron celebration. Does that mean anything necessarily? Probably not. But I do think that it's an encouraging trajectory. Like, the thing for me with Nico is I don't think anybody questions his physical giftings. Like, the dude is special. One of one when it comes to how he throws it and the way he moves, all those things. The size, the things you can't teach. I can't help but feel a little bit about him how I felt about C.J. Stroud his first year at Ohio State. Now, C.J. Stroud put up massive numbers, not the same kind of season, but you could just tell by watching him, he was the starting quarterback. He wasn't yet the guy. And I think for Nico Iamaleava, that step from this season to next season, I think towards the end of the year, we saw him become the guy. Heart of a line, 20 carries, Mike? 20 carries against that Ohio State defense? I was like, hey, this dude, he's earning his stripes if he didn't already have them. So I'm excited to see what he does, man, next year, because like you said, he's a chance here to project in a really exciting way for Tennessee. Let's pivot from Tennessee to the college football playoff, the teams that are still in it from the SEC. Georgia and Texas obviously have the work cut out for them with Arizona State and Notre Dame between those two. Obviously, Texas and Arizona State will play, and Georgia and Notre Dame will play in the Sugar Bowl. If I were to ask you to make a pick between Texas and Georgia, one of those two teams winning the national championship, or the field, are you taking the SEC or the field here the rest of the way in the college football playoff?
I'll take the SEC. I am, of course, an SEC homer, but I don't feel overly confident about it quite honestly, but there are things I like. If I knew Carson Beck was good to go, and obviously he's not, I'd feel better about it. I really like the path of Georgia and Texas, given that Georgia won't see Texas, Ohio State, Oregon until the national championship. So that's a feather in their cap. And then Texas even, if Texas had to, let's say Texas had to go through Ohio State and Georgia had to go through Oregon, maybe my answer is different. But the fact that Oregon and Ohio State are going to knock each other off, I think that really helps the case. And I really do think it's the national championships down to those four: Georgia, Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State. So give me the SEC. I think Texas certainly has got the defense. Now that when Quinn Ewers is on, he's money. He's not. It's so funny because people judge him, I think, based on fair or not. The recruiting services. I think one of them had him as the perfect prospect or whatever. He's not that. He's not the perfect prospect. But you know what he is? He's a really, really dang good quarterback. And when he's healthy, and quite frankly, he's only been healthy for about 4 games this year. He's money. So, and the way they ran the ball too. Again, I know Clemson's not like an elite defense right now, but rushing for over 300 yards. I said it on my show. If they're able to run like this the rest of the way, they're winning the national championship. Texas is. Again, will they do it 300 yards per game? Doubtful, given the competition that's coming. But the way Sarkisian is getting his running offense going, I really like Texas. And how can you deny Georgia? I mean, they had the toughest schedule. Everybody was enamored with Florida's schedule. Georgia's was just as tough, and they faced adversity time and time again. And just because Carson Beck's out, I don't think that eliminates them from anything. I think their defense will get them there. Now we're going to find out for real how good Gunnar Stockton is. And if he's as good as I think he is, Georgia can win it too.
And that's the thing. I'm glad you hit on that. The path for Georgia, it's like they probably should play for a national championship. Like will they win it? We'll see. But like they should be in that building based on who they're going to play. And this isn't to say anything of a Notre Dame or a Penn State, but like the way that Georgia recruits and Kirby Smart's pedigree, like they have everything teed up to go make that last game in Atlanta on January 20th. And for Texas, the same thing. Like, they have won games, really, with Quinn Ewers having game manager numbers. Now, the Georgia game, obviously, went for over 300 and played well from a, yardage perspective. But if that other shoe drops and he gets back into what we saw him be against Michigan and what we saw early on against A&M, look out for Texas now. So I've already picked Oregon to win the national championship on this show, so I won't flip that pick. I will, however, say, watching Georgia-Texas play for the SEC championship, I tweeted it out after the game. I was like, I feel like I just watched the national championship. So if you put them on different sides of the bracket, I wouldn't be surprised if we got another, not different. They are on different sides of the bracket. I wouldn't be surprised if you had Carson Beck healthy if we saw them run it back with the Texas-Georgia national title game. But we'll see. But I'm excited to watch that, man. When you look at the rest of this playoff field, Ohio State, Oregon, I think are the two that you probably circle as the teams that you just mentioned being in the top 4 to compete for national championships. Is there a draw here that if you were to be Ohio, if you're Georgia, if you're playing the who do we want to face in the national title game, is there one of those that you would pick as a better matchup for Georgia?
I still think it would be Ohio State. I know that's incredibly hard to say after what we just saw Saturday night. But again, this has largely been an inconsistent team. They get up for certain games. They don't get up for others. How will they get up for Oregon? I'm fascinated to see that game. But I was about to say, I think Georgia can push around Oregon, but I think Dan Lanning, he's been there long enough. I think he's kind of changed that culture where they're a lot better in the line of scrimmage. So which team can you really take advantage of more? I think it's Ohio State, even despite what we saw last night. Again, I think, Tennessee grad here. So this is very hard for me to be truthful, JD. I think Tennessee was overrated all year, especially on the defensive side of the football. Now, people say that means I think they're garbage and all that. No. But I sincerely think there was probably 3 to 4 defenses that were better than Tennessee just in the SEC this year. Texas, Georgia, and probably Ole Miss and South Carolina. I would legitimately probably put all of them ahead of Tennessee. I think Tennessee kind of feasted on a light schedule, and when they faced top competition, that they just didn't get it done. So I don't think the massive advantage Ohio State had against Tennessee, I don't think that would apply to Georgia, and I certainly don't think that it would apply to Texas defense either.
The interesting thing about this to me, Mike, is just what you said with Dan Lanning. Obviously, he's had some time to build that roster in those trenches. I cannot get out of my mind the idea of Dan Lanning playing his former head coach for the second time in Atlanta. Like, that to me is just too storybook for me to feel like Oregon's the right draw for them. So, again, whoever you were to draw there, Ohio State is obviously a juggernaut on the perimeter, and they're playing their best football, and Oregon's number one seed. So, like, neither is probably ideal for you if you're Georgia coming from that side of the bracket. You'd probably rather Arizona State goes on a run here and gets yourself into the college football playoff, and that's that. But or into the national championship game, I should say. So we'll see. We'll see. But I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, especially given, to say the elephant in the room here, Ohio State's big game issues in certain spots under Ryan Day. So with that being said, we'll kind of leave that there and see how the playoff, explains itself as we get more and more information on these teams. But a team that's not in the playoff that I think a lot of folks are, hoping will be there next year, especially if you're on the most southern part of the United States. How about Florida? Like, what they've done this year behind DJ Lagway and the resurgence for Billy Napier from where he was early on in the season to what they are now at the end of the season. They are very, very interesting to look at when you do the far too early projections 2025. Just what do you make of Florida and what they did this year and what they could be in the future?
Yeah, well, I thought Florida could exceed expectations, and then about 3 weeks into the season, I was ready to fire everybody. So
yeah, same.
Take my opinion with a grain of salt here, but of course, I'm no fool. I think DJ Lagway is awesome. He may be the best quarterback in the country, maybe the best player in the country. To me, it's between him and Lenora Sellers right now for best quarterback in the SEC next season. So can't wait to see those two guys. Unfortunately, they're not going to go head-to-head unless they play at the SEC championship. But, one thing, though, I know this may be unpopular to say right now, but I'm still not convinced Billy Napier is the right man for the job. And I'll tell you why. Because, again, I think DJ Lagway is so good that he raises the ceiling of that Florida program. And will they win despite Billy Napier? I'm certainly not saying that's the case right now because they're recruiting really well. They're attacking the transfer portal like they should be doing. And, I think they're a dark horse playoff contender. But again, we've done is flip the schedule from this year. Yeah. It's still a gauntlet. I mean, you got to go at, I don't know how good Miami's going to be next year, but you got to go at Miami. You got to go at A&M. You got Tennessee coming in late. Does that change that game at all? I know that they own Tennessee, but playing that in December is going to be interesting. There's still Georgia. I mean, on and on and on. What's a good year for Florida? What is this, year 4 for Billy Napier? And, at 9-3, he's probably coach of the year. I remember they nearly ran off Urban Meyer for only winning 10. Steve Spurrier quit because they only won 10. You know what I mean? Like, I thought the standard was significantly higher for Florida, but I don't know. They're so hard to put a finger on. Again, I love DJ Lagway. It looks like things are trending in the right direction, but it seems like every time Billy Napier takes one step forward, it seems like he takes 2 steps back. Now, he didn't at the end of the season. You got to give him all the credit in the world, and maybe I'm just the last Napier hater left, but they still got a lot to prove to me. And again, if they go 7-5, 8-4, I don't think that's that good given where they're at.
Yeah.
But again, it may be given that the schedule that they're facing.
I don't think what you're saying is crazy at all. Like, groupthink in our industry is a big thing, and if you say something that's counter to that on Twitter, you just get hammered. But I don't think what you're saying is crazy. Like, if Florida goes 8-4 next year, it'll be a 1-win improvement, and it won't be good enough, or it shouldn't be good enough for what that logo is, for what that university is, for what they've done historically. Like, I don't think 8-4 is a place where you say, yeah, but the schedule, in the future we'll eventually, no, the future is now. Like, you got a dude in DJ Lagway, and you hopefully are going to have a roster via the portal to go do something with that quarterback in DJ Lagway. Like, I think the big thing for them is just what you said. I love where we're at right now from a Florida fan. I love that we finished the year with 8 wins. I love that we won the bowl game. I love that we had 2 ranked wins to finish the regular season. But, it can't be okay, great, here we are, and let's just stay here till next season. It's got to be a next step kind of operation for them in 2025 for me to feel like they actually have something to them. We had Andy Staples on the show when the news broke that Billy Napier was staying at Florida, and he's a Florida grad, so I mean, this is obviously something that is important to him as an alumni. But he's like, they got to go to the college football playoff. And hearing that out loud, I was like, do they really? Because if this is at the point where they're like, I think trying to still make a bowl game. But as I thought about it more, and as we've seen them progress, like I think he's on the money. Like I think Florida, should they win 9 football games against that schedule, should be in the conversation for the college football playoff. If they win 10, they should be in. And if they don't do that, you're sitting here saying we got a quarterback in DJ Lagway. We're in a 4th year with a head coach. We should have a roster now if we go to the portal and do what we're supposed to do where we're good enough to compete for the playoff. Like if it's not happening this year, do we want to sign up for another year of this? That's, I think, my concern. So I'm right there with you. I'm excited. I think what Florida is in the Sunshine State is their stock should be as high as anyone else in that state, if not the higher than anyone else in that state. But very, very curious story arc out there in Gainesville. Now, here's my question for you too, SEC Mike, on it as it pertains to Billy Napier. Is it a situation that you could see where things aren't going tremendous early on for Florida, and let's say they kind of have a similar situation to this year where you start the year off a little bit rocky and you lose to Miami, you lose to an A&M, 2 football teams that are relatively solid when it comes to a roster, A&M especially, we'll see what Miami is. Is it a world where you pull the plug early on Billy Napier before the end of 2025?
Probably not, because just based on, I know you're having the same conversations with a lot of people in the industry, but there's not been a lot of coaching change, obviously, this cycle. Apparently, the feeling is there's going to be massive coaching change next year when we have a firmer understanding of, not collective bargaining, but the
revenue sharing,
all that. So people will know where they stand. So I think there's going to be a lot of coaching transition 11 months from now. So do you want to add to that mix? I mean, it's Florida. Florida should be one of the best jobs, but will it? I mean, Southern Cal could be looking. I mean, there's a long list. If Ryan Day gets eliminated next, I mean, all of a sudden he's on the hot seat again. I mean, there could be a lot of coaches that are out the door. So no, it's not that I'd be eager to pull the plug, because again, you got DJ Lagway, who'll only be a sophomore. Let's say he is a superstar. Maybe the schedule hinders you to where you don't reach that 9-10 mark, which you should be doing at Florida. You should be threatening to do that annually at Florida. But even if you're not, as long as they don't get embarrassed, and quite frankly, they were getting embarrassed. And even in this bowl game, it was like a travesty watching. I watch all the games twice. I don't even know if I have the heart to watch them play Tulane again. It was so bad. But even in that one, they were sending 10 men onto the field. They did it multiple times on special teams. They have. I mean, this is year 4, the end of year 3. We're still doing this. But no, unless we're getting embarrassed, I'm not firing him. And one thing we didn't mention, we should have led with this. Ron Roberts did one heck of a job. Florida's just been a nightmare on defense. They've actually turned into, by the end of the season, they were one of the better defenses, I thought, in the SEC. So that will be critical for next year as well. Can we maintain that momentum on the defensive side of the football? If we can't, they're certainly not going to make the college football playoff. But to say all that, I think you've made your bed with Billy Napier, and you basically got to stick it out through the entire DJ Lagway era.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you touched on the defense. How much better did they look on that side of the football against Ole Miss than Georgia did? And Georgia's been a juggernaut defensively under Kirby Smart since he's gotten there, it's felt like. And I mean, Ole Miss did whatever they wanted in that game against Georgia, it felt like, when it came to the Jackson Dart experience. So I'm glad you said that, because I think Florida defensively has really obviously taken a massive step on that side of the football, and curious to see what they are here, excuse me, in 2025. Last thing I'll say about the Florida job before we let you go, Mike, getting choked up talking about it. You made a great point about Florida and that head coaching position, the standard, the prestige, the brand, all those things. Like, if you were to move on from Billy Napier, and again, I'm not suggesting they do. I hope Billy Napier crushes it. I hope they make the college football playoff. I mean, I hope Florida has wild success under him next year. You can swing a big bat. Like, you can go and call someone who already has a big-time job and say, hey, come to Florida. We want to have you be our head coach. Are you interested? you're at least getting a couple messages back before they tell you no. Like, they're at least touching base on what's NIL, what's this, what's that. Like, people, I think, would be very interested in what that Florida job has to offer. So the plot thickens. We'll see what they are this time next year. But, in 11 months, be very curious to see if there is that kind of coaching turnover, whether it be at Florida or somewhere else across the board. Hey, SEC Mike, the best in the business. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. Go subscribe to their podcast feed, that SEC podcast. I mean, just blowing up the charts. SEC Mike, you are the man. We appreciate the heck out of you, brother. Merry Christmas. We'll do this again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, I know this is day after Christmas, but if you want to have fun, there's a video of Shane and I crying after the Tennessee got dismantled by Ohio State. So that's got 40,000 views just in today. So go check it out. You'll get a good laugh on that one.
Heck yeah, that's what I like to hear. I'm curious to see what that is right now after the fact here on this Thursday. Good stuff. SEC Mike, best of the business. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Obviously, SEC Mike, one of the best in the business. Appreciate him making time and jumping on the show. Let's pivot away from the SEC for a second, and let's talk about a team that I think flying under the radar is a funny way to phrase it. I think they were maybe flying under the national radar when it comes to the national championship. Previously, it was just in like, can they stay alive mode? And now it's like, how much damage can they do kind of conversation around the Buckeyes. If Ohio State beats Oregon, something that we've said here for the better part of the last few weeks is it is game on for the Buckeyes. It is game on. A prize pick square to monitor in this game is the Will Howard passing yard total. I'll tell you right now, take the more. Take the more, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. Again, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, gets you $50 in promo funds. Prize pick, super easy to use, comprehensive to play, easy to withdraw what you win. So get dialed in, use that code. When you use that code too, just so we're on the same page, let the folks at Prize Picks know that you're dialed in here. So code HARDCOUNT, we appreciate you in advance for doing that. But I love the Will Howard passing yard square for more, because I think what you're going to see from Ohio State in this game against Oregon is coming out swinging. They did it last time they played. Will Howard had a great game last time they played, went for over 300 yards. But I think the game against Tennessee is going to bolster the confidence a little bit heading into the spot against Oregon. Also, the familiarity you would hope for Ohio State offensively would kind of bolster the confidence. But here's the thing that makes them dangerous. If Ohio State does beat Oregon, I mentioned the confidence being built from beating Tennessee. What's a win over the top team in America going to do for you? Against a team that you lost to previously. To exercise that kind of loss and to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, hey, yeah, we've had our shortcomings. We've had some moments this year that we're not crazy about. But right now, we just beat the best team in America. Who's messing with us? Nobody. And the reason why I mentioned that specifically is if Will Howard goes out and throws for more passing yards in his prize picks projection, let's say he goes in the range of 300 yet again, which wouldn't surprise me. It'd be a lot, but I don't think it would surprise me. The confidence for Ohio State and just their psychological approach. When they lost to Michigan, it wasn't physical. It wasn't. And I think a lot of that, you tip your hat to Michigan. I know a lot of Ohio State fans don't want to hear that on this video or on this show. But it wasn't a situation where like you were just outmatched. You knew that. Michigan knew that. They lost that game in some way, shape, or form based on the psychological. You could pin it on whatever you want. You could say they overlooked them. You could say Michigan wanted it more. You could pin it on whatever you want to. But you can't tell me it was a matter of talent. And so, again, a win over Oregon, to me, does it fix everything psychologically? I don't know, because we aren't in that building and nobody can actually properly diagnose what the problem was against Michigan. But I will say this. I think at that point in time, to be psychologically in a different space than you've been the last few weeks, I don't know how much you can overvalue that if you're an Ohio State fan, or if you're in that roster in Ohio State, to beat the top team in America and to look in the mirror and know you're that team and you're not going to have to honestly step under a heavier bar the rest of the way here in the college football playoff. That's massive. That's absolutely massive. And I think for us, the college football public, that would verify everything that we've already known to be true about Ohio State, but to see it actually play itself out in practice. Because there is some small part of us that watches Ohio State, and I think with how lofty expectations were during the preseason with what they did via the portal, grabbing Will Howard, grabbing Quinshon Judkins, grabbing the best defensive player in college football via the portal and Caleb Downs, like the bar is always extremely high in Columbus. It got even higher with what they did via the portal, if that's even possible. And so I think in some small way, we're still waiting for like that Death Star kind of moment from Ohio State. We saw a version of it against Oregon, or at least we thought we did, but then they lost by 1 point. We saw them beat Penn State, but it wasn't quite as impressive as you would hope. You saw them beat Tennessee, but you're also like, we don't know exactly what Tennessee is. We know who Oregon is. We know exactly who Oregon is. Oregon has proven to everybody who they are. And so for Ohio State to round into final form and to reach their own expectations internally, and honestly for the rest of us to see them be that Death Star kind of outfit, that's terrifying. That is absolutely terrifying, because what I just said a second ago, there's not a tougher test for Ohio State for the rest of the way. You could argue there will be other tests that present different challenges. Like if you play at Texas, yeah, Steve Sarkisian is going to twist the screws to you a little bit. All right, like Georgia, yeah, Kirby Smart, not going to be an easy out. But in terms of just the overall versatility and matchups you have to account for with how well-rounded Oregon is, and the fact that you already lost to Oregon one time and they get a second crack at you, like that in itself would be absolutely massive on a number of levels, and tell us who Ohio State is and tell Ohio State internally who they are. And that confidence internally would propel them, I think, in a way that, again, would be a problem for the rest of college football. So here's what I would say is massive for Ohio State in this spot against Oregon. I think Ohio State is at their best when they're the one applying pressure, when they're the one trying to throw haymakers. And at times this year, it's felt like we've seen Ohio State walk out there, and conservative's the wrong word to use, but I don't think we've seen Ohio State cut it loose all that frequently this year. The Oregon game, I think you could argue you did. The Penn State game, I don't think we did. The Michigan game, we definitely didn't. Like, for Ohio State, I think we're going to see them be more aggressive in some small part because that's their only choice at this point. Like, there's nothing to protect if you're Ohio State. You didn't win the Big Ten. You've already lost to this team. You're playing for your national title life here. Like, everyone's still got takes on Ryan Day, and they'll have more takes if you lose to Oregon, as fair as it is or isn't. So with them coming out swinging, that's another reason why I love the Will Howard more on his passing yard total. I think Jeremiah Smith, we're all on the same page now. If we weren't before, he's got to see the football, I would venture to say 8+ times. So take his reception yard square or receptions or reception yard squares on prizepicks.com as well if you want to. The bottom line here is this is a different Ohio State team walking into this game. And if they beat Oregon, it will be another iteration of a different Ohio State team walking out for all the reasons I just mentioned. Psychologically, competitively, I mean, in aggression standpoint, like they are in this spot now where they're about to flip the on switch. If they beat Oregon, they should be, and I believe will be, the national title favorites. So I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be the game of, I would have to imagine, this upcoming college football playoff round 2. And you better believe we will have thoughts and takes for you as soon as that thing wraps. So keep it locked right here. Make sure you're subscribed. And again, use code HARDCOUNT at prizepicks.com. $5 in lineups gets you $50 in promo funds. Hey, we appreciate y'all being a part of this, man. Appreciate SEC Mike once again jumping on the show and bringing some insight to us here on this platform and just talking some ball with us, man. And appreciate y'all talking ball with us, whether it be in the comment section, whether you're just firing off shots on the social media side of things, behind a burner or otherwise. We love y'all, man. And we appreciate y'all making this show what it is. For Caden Smith on the ones and twos, for myself and J.D. Pickell, you matter. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.